Oh, it's 1 p.m. right on the nose. For those of you joining us today, thanks for doing so and spending some time with us. We're excited to be here and talk to someone who I think is doing some really cool stuff in the space, and hear a bit more about how he approaches that, some of the sort of the details, and have a bit of fun, hopefully, with this as well. And those of you who have joined before would probably recognize myself. I'm Jamie, and I am on this from near Toronto, Canada, on a very sunny day that actually is really beautiful out there. So my dog keeps wanting to go out. I've already taken him out 3 times already today. So it's great to see all of you. And I'll let the other two gents on this introduce themselves as well.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm Josh Camrath, also from Bongo. A couple time zones away, though, from Jamie. So I'm in northern Colorado at the Bongo HQ. And it's actually a little chilly out here. So I was hoping it would be sunny, but it's overcasty and a little chilly with some flurries when I was driving into the office this morning.
Hi, everybody. I'm Keith Meyerson. I am out in Salt Lake City, and I have no idea what it's doing outside. I haven't opened my shades yet. So formally from Powder, which we're going to be speaking about today, but I'm running my own consulting group, which is the CAM Consulting Group. So looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Keith. And I know we had a little bit of conversation yesterday, which I thought was great. And I thought, as I mentioned to you, we might just start with giving people an idea of the program that we're digging into and sort of what it involves. And, start there.
Yeah. So high level, it's probably the same boat that most everyone is in every organization, which is leadership development. The organization, through their employee engagement survey, realized they needed a better focus on leadership development throughout the organization. So my position was created to at the holding group level, basically, to create a consistent and scalable leadership development program across the brand. And talking about time zones, this included people in 4 different time zones across North America. So some interesting challenges as a team of 1 at the time to come in and build this bespoke program to meet those needs.
And how many people were you targeting with the program?
Initially, we ran a pilot with 3 of our resorts, and I should say Powder is an adventure lifestyle organization. So if you're on the East Coast, you might know Killington. If you're on the West Coast or Canada, you might know Silver Star, or Snowbird, or Copper Mountain, and then Woodward brand as well, which is a really unique experience. So we had locations across North America. We figured starting with a pilot group would be best so we can get the feedback and iterate as we went. So the original pilot group had about 300 participants, and it was interesting. We decided to start with lower level supervisors. So we called them level 1, level 2. So the first time supervisors and then their managers. So, traditionally we would start at a leadership level, executive level, and push our way down. But we thought this would give us the biggest bang for our buck, have the most immediate impact on the hourly personnel, because we ramp up. We go anywhere from 2,000 employees to 8,000 and change in season. So we really wanted to make this something that was exponentially impactful.
Nice. And I remember yesterday you were kind of talking about how you dig in first. So sort of understand what you need to target, how you need to deliver, what the outcomes are going to be, how you're going to measure. So could you maybe walk us through how you're thinking around that?
Yeah, this was interesting because I was brought in and told we need a leadership development program. The board is on board. The engagement survey really told us this is something that we need. And I was like, can I find my way to the restroom first? I mean, day one, I had no idea about the industry, the office, the people. So this conversation with the CEO, I really wanted to dig in and understand what the needs were. And from their perspective, it was leadership development. Well, what I did was I had interviews with about 30 people, and this was, the corporate executive team, plus locally the people that we were going to impact. And I talked to the general managers of the properties and the HR teams of the properties. And what became very clear is they didn't need a leadership development program. They needed a management development program. It was the foundational competencies and behaviors. And the actual competency framework that I developed was born from those conversations, which was a mismatch to what they thought they needed to begin with. So that was an interesting conversation, selling, my boss and the CEO on what the needs were, and then how to go about doing that. I mean, how do you do a management development program that's going to impact people in 4 different time zones that are on a mountain for the most part? So some interesting challenges there.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's an understatement by the sounds of it. So how do you surface the pieces that you think are the things that should be focused on, that you want to make an impact on? Like, how do you go, like when you're talking to 30 people and you've got all these people in different mountains, different time zones, how do you know what are the things that matter and are going to move the needle?
It's a combination between understanding what they feel is important and then marrying that with the strategic goals of the organization and seeing where the alignments are. Because if there's a mismatch in either perspective, it's not going to work. If our strategic goals are one thing, but the users, the people, the participants, or the general managers that are going to support this don't agree that the behaviors are aligned, we're going to have some change management challenges, right? So for me, it was really understanding both and then looking for patterns. Where are the commonalities? And while you really need to build customized programs to fit the needs of the organization, it was a really demonstrable here, there are certain things that I think we can all agree from a first-time supervisor management perspective, there are certain behaviors that are absolutely fundamental. And what became very clear was we were living in a world where our supervisors, through no fault of their own, were very transactional because there was a vacuum. No one ever told them what good management was. No one ever told them the standard. No one ever gave them the development. And I think that's common in business. So how do we expect them to exhibit behaviors if we never told them what the expectations were and never gave them the development? Exactly. So it's really understanding what are the fundamentals that are going to ladder up to support any of our strategic goals. The things that I did want to focus on, though, I wanted to make sure that we could tie this to future ROI and business impact, right? We wanted to make sure employee engagement scores were positively impacted because that's the whole idea was born from that. We wanted to make sure that we could tie this to customer sat or NPS scores. We really wanted to talk about tenure because of the seasonality and the competition for talent across our industry is difficult. So we want people to see us as an employer of choice. So they're coming back season after season. And really the make or break point, the friction point is the supervisor, the manager. If someone's not having a good experience with their manager, they're not coming back. So I think those conversations, understanding those goals really helped us create the framework and the content.
Yeah, that's excellent because I think the saying is like people quit their manager, their boss, they don't quit the company. So that's I think that's excellent. So when you were kind of thinking about this and there's these people on a mountain in different places, how did you decide, what to design into this program that would keep them engaged to the duration of the course or the program?
The first thing was trying to solve the problem of how do I have a traditional leadership management classroom-based program for people in 4 different time zones that are on mountains. And talking to the local teams, even within the resort, well, this day works better for finance, this day works better for IT, this day works better for snowmaking operations or ski patrol. There was no consistent alignment. I realized there wasn't going to be a good time to do this. So I needed to find a way to create an asynchronous program, but I didn't want to lose that classroom peer-to-peer experiential portion, which really became a unique challenge to solve for. And, finding an LMS that had Bongo, honestly, as the feature set was really the solve here, because it allowed me to create experiences where people were, networking and learning from each other, or simulating a classroom environment of having tabletop exercises or peer-to-peer interactions, but doing it in different time zones at their own leisure, at their own pace. So that was the key solve. Once I did that, then it was a matter of, okay, what does the program look like? And I built it in phases. So each module is competency based.
Okay.
We have a knowledge portion, an activity portion, and an application portion, because far too many learners view training as a static compliance event.
Mm-hmm.
I took my training. Well, it doesn't mean you know what you're doing. You just took the training, right? So that was a big hurdle to overcome, because people just wanted to check the box and get done with the training. And that's not the way we built the program. We wanted people to get the knowledge, to then interact with each other, to then practice and fail and reflect in a safe space before they went out and applied it, and then came back and had those interactions again to reinforce or adjust what they were doing. So that's where we really got the engagement. We allowed this social component to thread throughout everything we did, even though it was asynchronous in different locations.
Awesome. Josh, I'll let you jump in. Do you have some thoughts or observations so far? Questions for Keith?
I guess more just a comments that, I obviously we at Bongo work with thousands of L&D professionals, and one of the things I really, I guess, appreciate, admire about Keith is, both the combination of having a user population that, maybe there's a stereotype of ski patrol people, like they're on their feet and they're adventurous. A lot of times they're, hitting a tool, either like Keith mentioned, from an asynchronous standpoint or from a mobile device. And, so that can be like a very challenging environment to create impactful courseware or modules in. And one of the things I really, I guess, appreciate about what you built with Powder is, I think a really engaging piece of combination of curriculum, but also really centered around like the business impact, and looping ROI effectively back into, like, was this course worth it? This is not just what we're going to teach, but like why we're teaching it. And just, I guess, again, kind of a comment of something I've been really impressed, in working with you or seeing you work, Keith, is just that you've had that as like the front and center.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
I think I mentioned that too as well, Keith, that I feel, unfortunately, that's too rare, and from what I've seen over the years. And so one of the things I'm curious about is when you sort of had this 3-step approach with everyone, where you were giving them practice, which also I think is sometimes not typical with that peer involvement. What was kind of the reactions you were getting from the participants?
I love the question, because it brings up a good conversation. One of the challenges I didn't anticipate was the reluctance to film themselves and share it with their peers. They were really adverse, which, when I've shared this with colleagues, everyone's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. This is the TikTok generation. Everyone should be fine with, and I went, yeah, but that's not our talent pool in the ski industry. At the supervisory level, you have people that have been in the ski industry for 10, 15, 20 plus years, right? They're diehard adventure lifestyle people, and they love the mountain. So it was, how do we create a safe space where they're still sharing videos and commenting on each other's videos? We then used those lessons. We created user testimonials, right? So they're learning from their peers, and they're hearing from their peers about, this is safe. No one else is seeing this. I mean, we promoted that. Like, you're in cohorts. We designed the cohort so there's no one in your chain of command in that cohort. It's a safe space. And then when we got the resistance, we pivoted a little bit. And from the video assessment standpoint, we used the AI coach, which was phenomenal. So a great use case was we were talking about communication and communication styles. So we taught participants that. Then we gave them a use case and said, you need to go persuade this person who is this type of communicator to get an approval. And they would have to do that using AI coach, which would give them immediate feedback. Well, then they'd have to do it again, the same exact use case, but now the individual they're talking to had the complete opposite. So you're going from someone who focuses on empathy to somebody who's very analytical.
Yeah.
You still want the approval, but
yeah.
you need to change your communication style. So what this allowed them to do in a safe place was practice that, because they've probably never had to do that before or think about what they were doing.
Right.
But the immediate feedback to 300 people was phenomenal. That's not something I could do. I was fortunate that I was able to hire a leadership development manager, but still between the two of us, 300 people. And then ultimately when we launched to the enterprise, 700 people who needed this feedback. That would be impossible for us to do without Bongo and the AI coach.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I remember one of the quotes or the term that you use is a force multiplier, which I really liked, which is scaling yourself basically. Because I think about like in a previous role that I had, how I had to assess videos and look at transcripts and make sure people were doing the thing and saying the thing. And yeah, it's labor intensive. Like it takes so much time. And I remember I used to think like, I'm sure there's better things I could be doing with my time, that actually like impact the business. And so I think that's so excellent that you were able to kind of let a tool do that for you. And I think we've touched on this before, like when Josh and I have talked about this as well. The one thing that I think stands out for people is the AI coach that, as you mentioned, it doesn't care, what you look like, your age, like anything. It's just looking for the things that you have told it's got to look for. And I think that makes people feel even safer. I like that you pointed out to them the chain of command is not involved in this, but as well, the tool that's giving them the feedback doesn't really care about all those things that someone else might care about. The AI didn't have a bad day, right? And then go in to assess people being grumpy. It just looks for the stuff. So do you think that kind of increased the amount of practice that people did?
Oh, absolutely. Because they could practice.
What did you find?
Without fear of judgment. They didn't have to wait for somebody's schedule to allow it. And I know there's concerns, right? Because AI is still relatively new and people still need to validate the content. And we did a demonstrable amount of testing, right? We really stress test the system to make sure the feedback is what we want the feedback to be. We don't want the AI to give, feedback that's kind of counter to what we're teaching. So we found it to be very useful and very helpful. But yeah, the engagement was great because people didn't have to share videos with each other, which we heard they were kind of nervous about. And it was a small minority, but a vocal minority, right? But we wanted to address their concerns too. So leveraging that gave them, again, that safe space to fail without retribution and just get those gentle nudges on how to correct and to really play with the system and have fun with learning at the same time. We don't want learning to be a chore.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
want it to be enjoyable and to have them feel confident about their improvement. And they could see their improvement as they practice because they're getting that immediate feedback.
Yeah, nice. I like to say that people aren't learning if they're not having fun, right? So, and one of the things too, and just in terms of the numbers that you were sharing, like 300 to 700 and growing, I think what I would have loved to have had when I was assessing, I was looking at salespeople and their videos and how they were handling demos. What was a little bit frustrating for me was that with a team of like 15 people, I would have to watch the videos from all 15 people to then figure out who I needed to focus on, versus what you were probably able to do would be able to kind of see the lower score people, just focus on them, let the other people continue to succeed, and let's just dig into these people who have lower scores and find out why. I wish that I had that, and I'm pretty sure with 700 people that was pretty helpful to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we learned from the pilot group was phenomenal. I mean, some of the feedback we got, again, the intention was to be iterative. We wanted this to be a completely hands-off, asynchronous experience based on the discovery work I did. But then we found out from the users, we really wish we could all get together on a Zoom call and talk about this. We're like, awesome. Like we weren't going to mandate it. So we offered up these booster sessions. And then, hey, we really wish we could recap at the end and give you feedback. Awesome. Let's do a recap, right? So one of the first recap sessions, not everyone, there was a couple people that said, I wish there was more information on this topic. I'm like, well, I didn't want to overload you. We're like, well, it'd be really great if you curated a list of additional. I'm like, done. So then we would curate a list. We give them a link as part of every future module. So if they wanted to go down the rabbit hole of podcasts or e-learning or audiobooks, we would offer that up. So the engagement was really driven by them in a lot of respects, and things that we learned that we didn't anticipate. We expected, a lot of pushback in those areas, and we didn't get it from that.
Well, that's awesome, because you actually are starting to give answers to another question I wanted to ask, was because it freed up some of your time. You've already given me some examples of how you were able to dig in a bit more. Like if you were manually assessing all these people, that stuff that you just shared would not have been possible. Like there's no way there would have been booster sessions. But I'm curious, like what else were you able to maybe dig into for the business because of this time saving that you had?
Well, it allowed me to get involved in other projects across the enterprise.
Nice.
Woodward was looking at revamping its coaching certification program, and they were kind enough to ask me, hey, could you, carve out some time? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's important. I'd love to be involved in that.
Nice.
We were in the middle of we just selected a new HRIS, so we had a new implementation project, and I've done countless learning and talent implementations, obviously with HCM. So, I was invited to participate in some of that. So it allowed me to use my previous experience and my passions in other areas that I would not have had the time for if I was focused on giving, one-to-one learner feedback for 700 people.
Oh, that's awesome. So I just see kind of time-wise, maybe we'll think about wrapping up. But before we do, I'm curious for our audience, because you gave me some good advice yesterday in our chat. And I'm curious if you have maybe like some tips or advice that you would give people who are watching this to be able to kind of not necessarily replicate what you did, but to kind of do a similar approach where you were thinking about business impact, where you were connecting dots, where you were thinking about engagement, personalization. Like all of these things I think are so great, but are difficult for many people. So is there maybe some tips or maybe like a piece of advice you might want to give to people?
Aside from hiring me as a consultant to help them?
That's a good one too.
Was that subtle enough? Yeah, I think, listen, I came into this with the thought in mind, been there, done that, have way too many t-shirts. I can create a leadership development program in my sleep. And I realized quickly that was the stupidest thing I could have thought. I really needed to immerse myself in the business to really understand it from the learner perspective, from the executive perspective, not only what's needed, but what's going to be supported. I mean, I was very fortunate from a technology standpoint. I had a blank check. It was because the thought, and we talked about this initially, the thought from the executive team was, well, this is classroom based. I'm like, no, we can't do it. You have to do it class. How do you run a leadership development program that's not a classroom? And I just kind of smiled, and the CEO's like, oh, you figured it out. I'm like, I think I did. And when I pitched the idea about using Bongo to replicate the social learning, he's like, wow, this could probably work. I'm like, where have you been all my life? Let's do it, right? So getting the support is instrumental. I think the highest indicator of success is the level of involvement from your senior leadership team. And I don't mean tacit approval. I mean active involvement. And Justin asked me, he's like, well, what do you need from me? I said, anytime you talk to your general managers, I need you to ask them what they are doing to support the program.
Nice.
And looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I don't think that's the way to go." And I said, my heart, I was just dejected. I'm like, we're doomed before we start. And he said, "This is too important. I think I need to have dedicated calls with each of them on an ongoing basis." I'm like, "Oh my God, I love you." Yes, like that will help, because if it's not important to you, it's not important to them.
Yeah.
And especially because we weren't training the leadership teams at the resorts, we were training levels below them, right? So how do you get them involved in the program so they support it and they can reinforce it and they can make it into the flow of work? I think those are key things to consider when you're designing a program.
That's awesome. This is great. I like I said yesterday, I love these conversations with you, Keith. Like, this is great. And Josh, how about you before we close?
Yeah, I guess I would just echo, pretty much exactly what you were just saying, Jamie. It's easy, what Keith was describing. It's easy to kind of get in the groove and think, that you've been there, done that, and especially with serving a I guess new or a different than traditional type of learner and user population. Like, there's always something to learn and something new to apply. And again, really just appreciate both just hearing you speak, Keith. It's obvious that you've gotten a lot of value out of Bongo, but I think for us to see how you've been able to deploy our tool and the impact that you've been able to make across several hundred learners and has been pretty awesome. And as Jamie just mentioned, the conversations and kind of hearing your, I guess, testimony of how both you're using our tool, but also just how you're deploying L&D and getting buy-in across the org and having it free up your time to be able to get more involved in more cross-functional ness. That's like exactly what we want, right? Both, I think, from an industry standpoint, but also what Bongo wants is to help free people's time up so that they can be more impactful, spread their wings wider, have a larger, more meaningful impact. So again, appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. And, again, also appreciate just the relationship we've been able to kind of forge over the last couple years.
Yeah, me too. It's been great. Just one final thought before we disconnect. I never would advocate that you look for technology first and build your programs around the technology. I fell into Bongo because I had a need that I could not solve, and in doing so, stumbled upon Brainier and Bongo and that tight integration. That helped me solve my problem. I would, when I used to do learning or talent system implementations, I would always say to people, "Hey, don't build your strategy around this investment, but you better consider it because you're spending a lot of money on this investment, right? You don't want the tail wagging the dog." So I just, this is not a paid endorsement, obviously, but Bongo solved a huge gap in my ability to launch a successful program. And I very much appreciate that. And I very much appreciate the conversations that I've been able to have with you and your team to help solve some of these problems in a creative way. It's been a great relationship.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for letting us know that. And thanks for spending time on here today. And for everyone watching as well, and who watches in the future, thanks for spending the time with this conversation. And hopefully you've got some value out of it, because I certainly did. So that's excellent, Keith. I'm sure I'll see you soon. But to everyone watching, have a great day wherever you happen to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See ya.